Chris and Hal Puthoff had met with Leslie Kean at the Ritz-Carlton, where we sort of let her know, you know, and she was taken aback since we were all senior people, and so she had to take it seriously. And I was dumbfounded when the New York Times came out with that. Of course, I told Leslie, and I will answer your question, John, I promise. But
we're getting there.
But I remember when it came out on that fateful day, the story was wrong, and I got a hold of Leslie and I said, it's not about $22 million and the Pentagon has a UFO program. It's about there's an entity out there. There's some kind of non-human intelligence that's living with us on this fucking planet. I'm sorry, I'm getting all wound up. That's the story. And she said they wouldn't let me run it like that. And it's still very, very difficult. So I give the New York Times a lot of credit for running this story, but for missing the big point. We're not alone. And we never have been alone.
Nevertheless, we're just telling you, that's what the abomination that causes desolation is. It's not something done in a temple over in Jerusalem. Yeah, it's something he's done. It's been done. Like the other part of the plan, yeah, that they've already put in place, kind of like this war that got started. This has all been being planned by these people, this little group of people, for years. What that whole, building is about, that's him telling them. I'm at 721 through 725, what is it, 5th Avenue or whatever? 721s through 725. That's literally the little horn from Daniel. Again, 33rd degree Freemason, Norman Vincent Peale. You know, if you go to Daniel chapter 7, verse 21 through 25, it's him saying, I'm that guy, 666, 21, all these things. I'm George Washington. You know, that's why Washington was made Master Mason on August 4th, 1753.
At the age of 21.
At the age of 21. Yeah, the whole rotten foundation of the United States isn't what people think it is. Reason they chose August 4th? Well, according to the Talmud, that's in the Gregorian or the Julian calendar, yeah, the day that the Second Temple was destroyed. It was August 4th, 70 AD. If you go look into July 4th, 1776, you'll also find out in the Jewish calendar, what they call the Hebrew calendar, the Babylonian calendar, that's the date that the temple wall, the walls of Jerusalem were breached in 70 AD. And that's the anniversary they chose to found the United States. See, there's a reason that eagle, has those branches, in his, claws, right? That's them saying they did it. They didn't need God to send a dove. They had an eagle, right? That's their message to God. Same reason they went, with the same thing to the moon. Look into the moon landings. July 16th, 1969. Look at what date that falls on. That's when it started. And then look at the end date, July 1969. Look at it that year particularly on the Jewish calendar. See if there's a similarity between the holidays they might have been celebrating on those 2 days and the holiday I just told you about, the founding of the United States. And then ask yourself, how many more coincidences do you need if you don't know this already? So Donald Trump knows it all.
Well, because there are more.
Yeah, there's plenty more, right? And again, you don't have to be engineers, mathematicians, physicists, any of that to do the probability in your head on that one. It's too many to be a coincidence. So we're telling you again, that's the abomination of desolation. He's done it. There ain't no going back. The river that's drying up, it's the river on this planet of life. There's nothing that they can do to stop what they've already done. They've went too far with that. The problem is, God's going to allow this to go on a little bit longer, and we have faith. Well, we have faith that He'll put a stop to it. Yeah. Now, what we are going to tell you is after April, we know something else is going to happen. Just like, by the way, the reason we weren't surprised, the reason we were wanting to go is we knew when that was going to happen. We knew it, and it happened. That's what's so scary, is you find out just how accurate the Bible is when you actually believe God. And she can tell you, it's terrifying. Yeah. Or, well, the accuracy, I guess. There's no doubt. So we know after next April, what's coming next is going to be even worse. And that is, I guess, it's a little bit too much for us to go into this video with you. We just wanted to come to you with this message about what the abomination of desolation actually is. We had to come all the way to purge a dead city to try to make a point, yeah, about all this. So maybe you'll help us. Maybe after April of next year, you will do the right thing when you realize what's going on. Yeah, please. I know you can. I know you can help us, and you can get this to other people who listen. We don't want everybody to die, do we? And we know that God can fix all of this. We know He can make this go away, and we know there's no hope for this earth now. What they've done, the negotiating with God part, we've done all that. It didn't stop a single thing, did it? We negotiated. We begged. I begged, at least. I don't know about you. What I mean, did you? I don't know. I never asked you that. But were you begging Him not to make it so?
Yes, I did, and then I realized that it just has to happen.
It had to happen, right? Once God said it, we've done what we've done wrong, and we deserve like a lot of punishment for it. But He's been nice, and as long as you stop doing what we're doing, you know, He's forgiven us of all these things. It's okay. It's okay. So we begged, and we hope that the things wouldn't happen. Just, you can tell them, I don't care. You can tell them about like you hoping that maybe one of the dates wouldn't happen.
Yes, because I just didn't want it to be the end so bad.
Yeah. So,
I knew if one of the things doesn't go according to Bible, that it won't be true.
That it won't be true,
But,
right? That's what, you know, deep down, that's why in December of 2020, we were arguing. I had all kinds of crazy ideas in my head. Maybe he doesn't understand, you know, I'll jump the fence at the White House. We'll try to talk to him. We'll do something, you know. We'll get some attention somehow, yeah? I didn't do it. Now I regret, because I could have done it, and I don't know, maybe it might have changed things, but I don't think it would have at this point. I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
But we know for a fact now, down to the, you know, you can go ahead and bet down to the hour, and I'm saying that for a reason, down to the hour. Yeah, it's accurate. Yeah, and there ain't no doubt in our mind now. That's why we're doing this public. After next April, you'll understand the United States, because one of the other things Trump did before he left, I'll cut something in here for you. But one of the other things Trump did before he left, if I'm not mistaken, was he signed this, he agreed to do something that I don't think any of the other presidents would have done. To give them the $2 trillion that they needed for the COVID-19 relief bill, that they had pushed through Congress with Rubio. I'm guessing this had to have something to do with Rubio, because he was the one behind the whole Senate thing, on the Senate side at least, UFO thing. Was the UFO disclosure, and he started, and now that's written into law. It's part of the National Defense Authorization Act. And the people that have been people that are part of this little plan with this little group of libertarians, that was the one final thing that they could wrestle away from this, liberal New World Order types. Yeah, they could get the secret out.
It just didn't connect with anybody. Nobody really paid it any attention, because this whole tradition of disbelief, this whole idea that the press and the media and the military put out, saying, it's all a bunch of horse crap, right? That was so strong, no one was able to break it until Mr. Elizondo decided sort of half-heartedly cautioned him against it because he was a very senior officer, and he was young, you know, maybe late 40s, and he easily could have jumped, I think, into the senior ranks, but he decided to leave, and because he felt so strongly about this. So I introduced him to Tom, or put him together with Tom, and then Tom hired him for TTSA right away. And then Christopher Mellon, in the meantime, Tom had called Chris, and then Chris came in. So, these are really two guys, Chris Mellon and Lou, that I think everybody needs to tip their hat to them, because they really sort of jumped out there on this. And when we decided we were going to figure out how we were going to push this, it was a concerted effort. Tom backed this whole thing, Tom DeLonge, and I give him an enormous amount of credit. People sort of make fun of him because he's a rock musician, but when you talk to the man, he's nobody's fool, man. He is one smart guy. He very well read on the topic. He knew what he wanted to do. He went out and he did it.
Time is side by side, which means everything in the past and the future is existing in this moment, but within different frequencies. So a civilization that's at the end of their technological cycle could build a submarine that changes its voltage and materializes in that same location, just into our timeline.
We not be using the term aliens?
Yeah, alien is hard only because it's like that makes us think it's coming from Mars or some shit, or a different planet. These are more like entities. These are more like a lot of them are there's like clones that are like just fucking, like, you think we made Dolly the sheep and we think that we're like, you think that's all we've done in the 60s, we cloned a sheep? We might be a little bit more advanced than that. So what is something else that's super advanced, doing AI and creating things that can fly around and tamper? Well, are they little program bots? Well, where's like the mainframe? Well, maybe the ship is alive in a mainframe, biological organism, but it's metal and whatever, but there's an intelligence to it because it's so advanced.
Okay.
So the theory that they started showing up at the time we did nuclear weapons, they're not here to protect us, because that would be like not interdimensional, that'd be from like outer space.
No, not interdimensional, because the one thing we found out is that the EMP wave from a nuclear blast kind of travels through multiple dimensions. So stop. But the reality is too, is UFOs have been around forever. Like, you're talking biblical, you're talking religions, you're talking
the pyramids.
The pyramids, you're talking the Star of Bethlehem is not a star. The sun is big. The Star of Bethlehem is like a little ball of light that 3 dudes on horses followed for days, and it hovered over a manger. So think about that. What is that? Ezekiel's wheels, Fatima in Portugal. All these religious events are always the same thing. And you got to then go, well, what are they doing? What is happening from that? Well, we start cults. We go crazy. We create different religions. We have different belief systems. We get really scared because they prophesize the end of the world. They tell you that if you do something wrong, you're going to go burn in hell for eternity. But if you listen to what that voice is in your head, that's God. So do that. And then someone hears a burning bush and they go and start a religion. It's like holograms and technologies and making people not be together, making us think that there's a dude like Allah or Jesus that created the universe versus source intelligence, which is like your bandwidth, your fiber optic cable just to like consciousness, which is like the one power that powers the atom, that permeates everything. And we're all from it. But as long as we think it's a dude and that group over there thinks it's a different dude, we're going to hate each other, and we don't really evolve, and we don't really grow spiritually.
I figured this out because Jesus Christ showed me. The real Jesus Christ, not the guy who lives in the underworld, but the real Jesus Christ of the Bible. See, I actually believed God, and that's why I know what you guys are up to.
Thank you. When I came into office, I promised to look at the world's challenges with open eyes and very fresh thinking. We cannot solve our problems by making the same failed assumptions and repeating the same failed strategies of the past. Old challenges demand new approaches.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
It was 70 years ago that the United States under President Truman recognized the State of Israel. Ever since then, Israel has made its capital in the city of Jerusalem, the capital the Jewish people established in ancient times. Jerusalem is not just the heart of three great religions, but it is now also the heart of one of the most successful democracies in the world. Over the past 7 decades, the Israeli people have built a country where Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and people of all faiths are free to live and worship according to their conscience and according to their beliefs. Above all, our greatest hope is for peace. But we are confident that ultimately, as we work through these disagreements, we will arrive at a peace and a place far greater in understanding and cooperation. This sacred city should call forth the best in humanity, lifting our sights to what it is possible, not pulling us back and down to the old fights that have become so totally predictable. But the incredible future awaiting this region is held at bay by bloodshed, ignorance, and terror. It is time for the many who desire peace to expel the extremists from their midst. It is time for all civilized nations and people to respond to disagreement with reasoned debate, not violence. Let us rethink old assumptions and open our hearts and minds to possible and possibilities.
Scared because they prophesize the end of the world. They tell you that if you do something wrong, you're going to go burn in hell for eternity. But if you listen to what that voice is in your head, that's God. So do that. And then someone hears a burning bush and they go and start a religion. You know, it's like holograms and technologies and making people not be together, you know, making us think that there's a dude like Allah or Jesus that created the universe versus source intelligence. There's just like your bandwidth, your fiber optic cable just to like consciousness, which is like the one power that powers the atom, that permeates everything. And we're all from it. But as long as we think it's a dude and that group over there thinks it's a different dude, we're going to hate each other. Right. And we don't really evolve and we don't really grow spiritually.
You know, Tom backed this whole thing, Tom DeLonge. And, you know, I give him an enormous amount of credit. People sort of make fun of him because he's a rock musician. But when you talk to the man, he's nobody's fool, man. He is one smart guy. He very well read on the topic. He knew what he wanted to do. He went out and he did it. He did it so well that the FBI is talking to him now, trying to figure out how he did it. And yeah, I mean, you know, he's actually going to be talking to a whole group of people at the FBI Academy pretty soon on this. And so I give him a lot of credit for actually putting all that stuff together. And then, but the big thing, John, was Lou and Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon went after this, and then Chris went into Congress. And boy, I'll tell you, you know, he was a guy. He was a staff director of CISI, you know, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He knew everybody. And then, you know, of course, when he became the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, that was a whole nother thing. Chris ran all the SAP programs in the government. He ran, well, actually in the military, I should say. So when he went to Congress and he got Congress briefed, and then Lou was able to arrange a lot of this too with the Navy. And don't forget that this program, you know, that came out, and when the New York Times thing came out, it was me, Lou, Chris, and Hal Puthoff had met with Leslie Kean at the Ritz-Carlton, where we sort of let her know, you know, and she was taken aback. since we were all senior people, and so she had to take it seriously. And I was dumbfounded when the New York Times came out with that. Of course, I told Leslie, and I will answer your question, John, I promise. But
we're getting there.
But I remember when it came out on that fateful day, the story was wrong, and I got a hold of Leslie and I said, it's not about $22 million and the Pentagon has a UFO program. It's about there's an entity out there. There's some kind of non-human intelligence that's living with us on this fucking planet. I'm sorry, I'm getting all wound up. That's the story. And she said they wouldn't let me run it like that. And it's still very, very difficult. So I give the New York Times a lot of credit for running this story, but for missing the big point. We're not alone, and we never have been alone.
I'm Major Hathaway, enemy infiltration. What's this about? It's a genetic cyborg evolved from synthetic DNA. It breathes, sweats, bleeds. I'm a scientist. You know, you things are really something.
Trust me, do not believe what they told you.
The cyborg can learn from it.
You were wrong! Do you believe them?
I don't know what to believe.
Gary Sinise, Madeline Stowe, Vincent D'Onofrio, Mekhi Phifer.
Come to me.
They'll kill you!
Help me, please. It's me.
Imposter.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Not Spencer Owen.
It was a groundbreaking ceremony for a new factory.
Did she mention seeing anyone who was sick? Anyone on a plane, the airport?
No, she said she was jet lagged.
The average person touches their face 3 to 5 times every waking minute. In between, we're touching doorknobs, water fountains, and each other.
Beth. Mom? No, go up to your room, honey.
So we have a virus with no treatment protocol and no vaccine at this time.
Watch this. It's transmission, so we just need to know which direction.
On day 1, there were 2 people, and then 4, and then 16. In 3 months, it's 1 billion. That's where we're headed.
They're calling out the National Guard. They're moving the president underground.
People will panic.
Get away!
It will tip over.
The truth is being kept.
The names of everyone who serviced this room. It's an emergency.
You can't panic now.
I know.
I'm gonna get you home.
I got people too, Dr. Cheever. We all do.
Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anyone. Stay away from other people.
Get back in your car. We're not sick.
It's figuring us out faster than we're figuring it out.
It's mutated.
So I was sitting outside, and she came out and asked me, "What are you doing? You got to do something. You're falling apart." I had read about that virus enough at that time in the early part of 2020 where I knew, regardless of what my family member had told me and regardless of how well they had it thought they had it under control,
Yes, plus he told us to watch Contagion.
Yeah, he told us to watch Contagion and calm down, which I'm sure everybody else heard that because we heard it from everybody else all over the world over the following year. You guys were all being told the same thing. They already got their story straight, is what I'm getting at. The people in charge had to manage this thing, and they probably knew about it since at least August of 2019. The other things Trump did before he left, I'll cut something in here for you. But one of the other things Trump did before he left, if I'm not mistaken, was he signed this, he agreed to do something that I don't think any of the other presidents would have done. To give them the $2 trillion that they needed for the COVID-19 relief bill, that they had pushed through Congress with Rubio. I'm guessing this had to have something to do with Rubio because he was the one behind the whole Senate thing, on the Senate side at least, the UFO thing, was the UFO disclosure. And he started, and now that's written into law. It's part of the National Defense Authorization Act. And the people that have been people that are part of this little plan with this little group of libertarians, that was the one final thing that they could wrestle away from this, liberal New World Order types. Yeah, they could get the secret out. They weren't as concerned with the secret technology like the liberals were. See, Hillary Clinton, let me back up. She was supposed to be the disclosure president, by the way. She was supposed to come out and say, this was the plan. It's all out in WikiLeaks between Tom DeLonge and John Podesta. They were working with these Air Force generals to basically say they were going to go look into Area 51. And she was going to be the hip, liberal president and, do the UFO disclosure, except it wasn't going to be UFO real. It was like nonsense. It was going to be our high-tech stuff that they were going to kind of let out of the black.
A radically new space vehicle called the Ionocraft, which could be equally useful in communications, defense, or radar, is demonstrated in New York in scale model by its inventor, Major Alexander de Seversky. The bizarre-looking flying machine, which was 6 years in development, gets its power to move and to stay aloft some 60 miles above sea level from ionic emissions generated by electric impulses. It can travel several hundred miles per hour. The downdrafts of steam in the demonstration illustrate the propelling ionic emissions. Electrical potential will be provided by airborne solid-state electronic means without any moving parts. These convert thermal energy from either Earth or Sun into high-voltage potential.
We had your husband, President Clinton, on this show. He said, I asked him about UFOs in Area 51, and if he looked in, because if I was president, that's the first thing I do. I go right into those files and see what was going on.
Right.
And he said that he did do that.
Yes.
And that he didn't find anything.
Well, I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah, why not?
Right? And there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Unexplained aerial phenomenon, really?
Yep, UAP. That's the latest nomenclature.
I like the old one. I like UFO. I don't know why.
Well, I think we can use them interchangeably, but I would like us to go into those files and hopefully make as much of that public as possible. If there's nothing there, let's tell people there's nothing there.
What if there is something there?
Well, if there is something there, unless it's a threat to national security, I think we ought to share it with the public.
Well, what if everybody's all hopped up on medical marijuana and everybody gets paranoid? I would love it.
That's why I want more research.
If you share it with me, I'll decide what is the best course of action. I really have my ear to the ground.
Well, I'm more than happy to do that.
Our high-tech stuff that they were going to kind of let out of the black, yeah? And they're locked up in companies like Lockheed Martin, Leidos. People like my family member would know about, right? That one that told me about COVID. Anyways, this stuff's all black. And they've kept it locked up for a long time, probably because they've been using this technology they've got to, I guess, is maybe like a trump card, if that's what you want to call it, against the Russians or the Chinese. And they've been using it, I believe, what it appears to me to be at least, to try to chase down or gather information about the real UFOs that they had no intention of releasing under Clinton.
They can't believe what they're seeing, but they can, because it's true.
So this footage you saw is different than the footage that you see has been released by the Department of Defense?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, because I've watched it several times, and it's not the same. So I definitely saw different footage during those 2004 events of a different object by far. The object that I saw was a flying saucer shape, not a Tic Tac. A flying saucer shape, not a Tic Tac.
Wow, listen to that. That was from Trevor talking with Jeremy Corbell. Trevor was a petty officer 3rd class. He worked as a radar operator on the Princeton, and he says he was there on 14 November 2004 when Commander Fravor intercepted the Tic Tac, or he was on the ship. And very interesting, he says that he saw another object, and that object was not a Tic Tac, Listen to this.
You don't believe this saucer technology is ours?
Definitely not. Maybe we are experimenting with stuff like that, but yeah, I've never seen anything like it.
It's the common understanding of the people you talked with that this is not human technology.
Yeah, no. Especially aircraft going in and out of the water.
Out of the water?
Correct.
So Trevor's called in. I believe he's called probably by Kevin Day or someone that works with him in the radar, above him in the radar section. He goes up to the room. He goes into the CDC, says there's a few pilots there. There's some other non-pilots. He says all officers is what it sounded like to me. And then he watched the actual video. So he watches the video. Let's see what he says here.
SIPRNet is a secured, secret, downloaded already to that net.
The video was downloaded to that net.
Yeah, the one that I saw, yeah. When I came in there, I didn't know any of that. You know what I mean? I had no clue until a month or so ago that the pilot actually came in there with footage. So I think the footage that I saw, I'm guessing it's got to be from underneath the nose of the F-18. You can see that the F-18s are moving, and you see this object mimic the F-18s. This object had shot basically from the ocean up. You could see that. That object made a couple different quick maneuvers. So if the F-18 made a banked left, it mocked the F-18 every time.
Describing the object mirroring the pilot, so actually mirroring the movements, like mocking the movements. It was outpacing our best fighter planes.
Oh, easy. Oh my God, yeah. The last part of the video that I remember is that this object, if you're looking at the screen, it went left and then it banked straight up. I mean, it was insane. I couldn't even explain, like, it just went to the left really fast and went boom, went straight up. And I know this was on the SIPRNet because we slowed it down. Like, they slowed it down by frame, like basically in slow-mo. And you could see where this thing, it doesn't even exist. Like, it like skips time, where it's that fast that you cannot see this object for a period of a couple frames. And it just, boom, it goes up. And I remember the officer saying, there's nothing on this planet that can do that. It's not possible. That aircraft would be in pieces. How many G's is that to pull up like that?
Yeah. But nevertheless, they got that video out there with that little top secret tic-tac thing, which you can bet as sure as my grandpa would say, sure as God made little green apples. That thing came out of Lockheed Martin probably and Skunk Works. It looks just like an ionic lifter. And that's probably, just something. The guy from 60 Minutes Australia did a pretty good job on it. They had set up something out there in the Pacific with all those nuclear reactors on those ships back in 2004.
And then it came out, they got another video, so that was called the Tic Tac video.
Yeah.
And then they got another video called the Gimbal video, and that's even cooler. That was taken from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which is another aircraft carrier, and this time it was off the east coast of America.
They're really interested in our military, aren't they? Yeah.
And both of those aircraft carriers are nuclear powered, and the Americans would never admit this, but they are armed with nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing is there is a very strong link.
And several of these UFO sightings have been above secret nuclear weapons facilities. Almost every major nuclear power across the globe really has reported and declassified these sightings. You have talked extensively about the connection here, which might be helpful, I think, for some people to hear in advance of my next question, which is whether or not the U.S. government has considered utilizing nuclear-powered naval fleets to lure these kinds of things to further study them.
Now, in this country, we've had incidents where these UAPs have interfered and actually brought offline our nuclear capabilities. And I think to some, they would probably say, well, that's a sign that whatever this is something that is peaceful. But in the same context, we also have data suggesting that in other countries, these things have interfered with their nuclear technology and actually turned them on, put them online. So that is equally, for me, just as concerning. I think that there is certainly at this point enough data to to demonstrate there is an interest in our nuclear technology, a potential to even interfere with that nuclear technology. And when you look at all these naval ships out there, let's take the Nimitz battle carrier fleet, for example. In some cases, you're talking about a nuclear footprint probably bigger than most cities. You have a nuclear-powered carrier with aircraft on board and then you have nuclear-powered destroyers. You have nuclear-powered submarines, some of those with nuclear weapons on board, or certainly nuclear capabilities. I'll just say that. So I think, yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise that maybe there is an increased interest in our capabilities as it relates to our nuclear technology, and the Navy is certainly not immune to that.
What they had done, and they used those little Tic Tacs most likely as drones, but probes. They were trying to lure in some of these real flying saucers. Or what the book of Daniel would tell you, wheels of fire. Yeah? The guy from the Pentagon's calling them that, by the way, now, Lou Elizondo, calling them flaming shields, wheels of fire.
How long do you think we've been visited for? Is this since, it seems like flying saucer, the idea of the flying saucer seems to be a sort of post-war phenomenon. Do you think it's the last century, or do you think it goes back further than that?
Fantastic question. Let me share with you an experience that I had at in Rome not too long ago. I had the honor and pleasure of sitting down with some individuals that were out of the Vatican. And there was a scroll, and in this scroll it was written in Latin, and it was a communique between a Roman soldier and a Roman general, some 2,000 years ago. And what they described in this communique was the name for the Roman shield is Eclipus, means like eclipse, like a sun. And so they described these flaming Roman shields in the sky that would follow them from battle space to battle space. So it is quite possible we are dealing with something that could be potentially, not necessarily even from outer space. Believe it or not, it could be from right here. It could be right from this planet, and we're just now at a point where technologically we're beginning to interact with it. I'll give you another case in point.
Said he was just at the Vatican, and they showed him a 2,000-year-old scroll with these things. Well, they've known what they are. Angels don't have wings. They don't even understand what angels are, really. And why Paul says, he talks about people opposing themselves. And, that he's all this long suffering and the hope that God peradventure would grant these people basically the ability to see they're wrong, that oppose themselves. That ties into what angels are. It's opposing yourself. Nevertheless, Trump signed all this into law, and Hillary Clinton wasn't supposed to do all that. They just wanted to share technology that we had in America with China, probably. Same way Bill Clinton did with supercomputer stuff in the 90s. That's all that was. Well, they had that wrestled away from them, and this other little group, these other libertarians and patriots that were getting pissed seeing their country getting sold out, they wrestled it away from that group, and now they're doing the real UFO disclosure.
And then I got into a group of people, and they brought me in, and I was given all the permission. So then I come out with the book, and I go on national radio and all this shit. Well, apparently that group didn't really talk to another group of some other three-letter places, and those other places got really, because here's this our kid like telling the biggest national security secrets that we got, period. So what happened then was Hillary Clinton was running for presidency against I guess it was against Trump, and John Podesta was her campaign manager. Okay. At the time, he was also senior advisor to Obama. So I was holding conversations with Podesta to get to Obama, and I had 2 multi-star generals from Space Command and the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, that Skunk Works built Area 51, their elite engineering division. I had them all on this fucking emails, and we're setting up these conference calls and stuff. Well, Hillary Clinton's campaign got hacked by the Russians, WikiLeaks, and it outed all this shit about Podesta and her. And what happened with that was when all these news journalists were pouring through WikiLeaks to see what spilled from Hillary's campaign, they found these emails with me and Podesta talking to these generals about UFOs. So Wall Street Journal threw that onto the Wall Street Journal. What happened, though, is it gave me all this credibility, because then all of a sudden all these other people in the government knew that I was like hanging around with some big boys. So they all came out and said, there's a better way to do what you're doing. And then I hired the program director, the guy that ran the UFO program. And then I brought on another like 8 people from the DOD and the CIA. So they're all part of my company. And the first thing we did was take those videos to the New York Times and out the program. And then we went and spent 2 years briefing all the committees in the Senate and Congress and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So now you're seeing hearings. The DOD admitted UFOs were real. The Navy admitted, that's all us. The hearings at Congress and the UAP task force, that's all us. We started all of that. And intelligence to it because it's so advanced.
Okay. So the theory that they started showing up at the time we did nuclear weapons, they're not here to protect us, because that would be like not interdimensional, that'd be from like outer space coming to protect us.
Not interdimensional, because the one thing we found out is that the EMP wave from a nuclear blast kind of travels through multiple dimensions. So it's like that energy is fucking up whatever's in that location, and maybe those people are like, what the fuck was that? Let's materialize into that other timeline and get those motherfuckers to stop. But the reality is, too, is UFOs have been around forever. Like, you're talking biblical, you're talking religions, you're talking
the pyramids.
The pyramids, you're talking the Star of Bethlehem is not a star. The sun is big. The Star of Bethlehem is like a little ball of light that 3 dudes on horses followed for days, and it hovered over a manger. So think about that. What is that? Ezekiel's wheels, Fatima in Portugal. All these religious events are always the same thing. And you got to then go, well, what are they doing? What is happening from that? Well, we start cults. We go crazy. We create different religions. We have different belief systems. We get really scared because they prophesize the end of the world. They tell you that if you do something wrong, you're going to go burn in hell for eternity. But if you listen to what that voice is in your head, that's God. So do that. And then someone hears a burning bush and they go and start a religion. It's like holograms and technologies and making people not be together, making us think that there's a dude like Allah or Jesus that created the universe versus source intelligence. There's just like your bandwidth, your fiber optic cable just to
They seem to be interested in nuclear stuff.
There is an absolute connection to nuclear.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's the power unlock more than the destructive force?
I think
that UAP are interested in nuclear capabilities and our military capabilities. It's no different than we go to the Serengeti and we watch the cheetahs preying upon the antelope. It's interesting to watch. What are their hunting techniques? What are their capabilities?
That's Lou Elizondo, former director of ATIP, the government's Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, which studied UFOs from 2007 to 2012. Unfortunately, you'll have to wait a couple of weeks for my interview with him.
There's a lot of stuff I can't say, because, it hasn't been declassified.
So, and another really great video, Trump and UFOs, which you uncovered some really interesting connections, namely with his uncle, John Trump.
My uncle was a great professor, but my uncle was a professor for years. I even talk about my uncle was a professor at MIT. My uncle was one of the top people at MIT, but I'm smarter than him.
John Trump, his uncle, was a really smart radar scientist and worked at the Rad Lab, and also went to MIT. He was so smart that when Nikola Tesla died, he was called upon by the government to basically investigate all of his personal files and just kind of like go through like all of his notes and whatnot. He was an advisor to General Carl Spaatz, I believe, who his name comes up a lot in like even Roswell lore and stuff like that.
Connection.
So during that
and he was also very close with Vannevar Bush, John Trump.
Exactly, yeah. So and for people who don't know, Vannevar Bush, he was basically during World War II, like a lot of like the top scientists, but he basically just like headed this whole program for them.
And was instrumental in the Manhattan Project.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Exactly. So John Trump was in that whole circle of people, like like they were actually friends, Vannevar Bush and John Trump. It wasn't just like a casual thing. Yeah. So back to the General Spaatz thing, because John Trump was so influential in radar technology, and because he was a top advisor to General Spaatz, who comes up in UFO lore, I personally think he would have been involved in, for example, the 1952 wave over DC, which was a very radar-intensive wave.
Then the event you're talking about is July 1952. You have saucers on the White House lawn. That's a hyperbolic, but you had flying saucers over Washington, D.C. Maybe they would call John Trump.
I personally think that it would make sense.
Do you think?
What happened in 1952?
the DC UFO sightings in July.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the...
Well, what else?
The first H-bomb.
The H-bomb. Tell her, yeah.
Was the first hydrogen bomb in 1952?
Yeah.
Right? And that was when we see the big wave, right? And the big, like, DC wave.
Exactly.
The concern that I have is that in 1952, what if there was someone there to hear what we said in the Pacific? And we said, we are a hair's breadth away from being in possession of godlike knowledge, where we've been trapped here on this planet, unable to move beyond our own moon. If there was something or someone there to hear us, they probably heard us as saying, we're on the verge of being able to come visit you. That's terrifying.
Right now, an H-bomb involves something like 80 to 100 megatons of TNT. This is very theoretical, but if we can get to upwards of 10 to the 9th tons of TNT, we might be able to start folding space-time at will.
If we could manipulate variables in Einstein's equations the way we manipulate variables in Maxwell's equations, you would see certain kinds of things which tend to match claimed observations of UAP phenomena.
So, if E equals MC squared.
And that's what's coming after next April. Yeah, that's what'll bring the whole house of cards that is the United States down. It's going to cause a lot of trouble. Because the secret they've been hiding, yeah, it's not that there are aliens from another planet. They could have let that out. Matter of fact, anybody with common sense would know. They'd have let something like that out decades ago. Yeah, that'd be a good thing. You know, if they could, you know, make some kind of contact with aliens from another planet. No. That's not necessarily what these things are. Is there life on other planets?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If you read the Bible, you'll understand. If you actually read it for what God's, listening to what God's telling you, God's, what does it say? What did he say in Ecclesiastes? He's not like a man. He's not what? God's not what, Anna? He's not vain.
Vain.
Nope. He didn't do it for vanity. He said a man that works his whole life and doesn't have children is what?
I don't.
That was your favorite from Ecclesiastes, I thought.
Well, I
you don't remember? Yeah, I know you got COVID. My wife's got a long COVID, by the way. And for real, she does, like we know. So anyways, she's having brain fog. Yeah, well, the man who works, you know, and doesn't have children to leave it to, it's all vanity, in other words. So the bottom line is, God tells you, you know, he told Abraham to look up and out, you know, and he told Abraham his descendants would have all the land here. But he tells Moses the same thing from Mount Pisgah, right? Except he tells Moses to get up to the top of the mountain, and then he tells him to still look up in all the directions, yeah? In Isaiah, you get told the same things, yeah? By God, he said, I'm the God that made the heavens and the earth. I didn't make them in vain. I made them be what? Inhabited. Yeah. That's life. That's the eternal spirit. This earth will be burned up because of what we've done, but thank God through Jesus Christ that, you know, life will go on. And the people that are, you know, on this earth that God intended to bring from this earth through his spirit that's truth. That's his children, his words that were planted in this earth. They'll leave this earth as well. But everybody else won't. And it doesn't matter what NASA does or what Elon Musk does. They're not getting off this planet.
They're not going to Mars.
Definitely not going to Mars. Yeah, there's a good reason why. So the bottom line is, we know, he doesn't create things in vain. The angels aren't what people think they are, though, I hope that maybe this will help, that you'll see more clearly why Jesus would make comments about, not offending one of the least of the little ones, because their angel in heaven always beholds the face of the Father, right? I'm hoping that God will show you what that means. It's not talking about an afterlife, Nevertheless, they know, the United States knows that there are wheels of fire, and they come here and they mess with their nuclear weapons. They monitor what they do. And I believe personally, there's been some kind of contact between the United States and the occupants of these wheels of fire. The reason I believe that 100% is because I believe the Bible. And the angel Gabriel that came and talked to Daniel told him that he and Michael had been doing the same thing in Persia with the king of Persia. They weren't talking about these false teachers and false priests, false teachers, false prophets, tell everybody, that's spiritual battles. They were battling with the king, of Persia, spiritual. No, it's not. You'd have, the whole world would be destroyed. If you had fallen angels and angels fighting and all this Greek god stuff like people from these cities would have believed, the whole world would be destroyed. That kind of warfare. No. They were managing just what they've been told from the very beginning of the book that they're there to do. They were managing human beings and managing these kings, keeping Satan in check, basically. That's what they were doing. That's what the wheels of fire, the shields of fire, however they want to call them, the Bible tells us wheels of fire, the thrones, that's what they do. They preserve life up to a point, until the appointed time, right? And they keep the kings of earth on check. That is what these people, are telling you, without telling you that. They're saying that, these UFOs show up and bother their nuclear weapons and monitor their nuclear facilities, and they've been, and the reason, again, that the United States has kept it secret is because, you'd always hear from those pastors and teachers, where's the United States in the book of Revelation? Where's the United States?
And then they made up some story that two wings of an eagle. That's what United States.
That's what the United States is. That's not what the two, that is such blasphemy. It's not even funny. The two wings of a great eagle that are given to that woman, that's the two wings that God promises, that those who wait on the Lord, that means those who wait and watch, will be carried on eagle's wings. That's the power of the Holy Spirit that God gives all people who had faith and waited on Him. That's why Jesus told us to wait. It's not by my power or my intelligence that I know any of these things. It's through faith in the Bible and faith in Jesus Christ and the truth. That's what the wings are. But I've heard these false teachers say the wings of an eagle are the United States and Israel is that scapegoat in the desert. No, it's not. That's blasphemy, and that's the United States saying it's God. And the United States ain't God. They know this little group that's getting exposed by the Congress now that's been covering up the UFO secret, they know what the UFOs have told them. They just ain't accepting it. We know that the smart people, the complete, what we would have went to school with as engineers, and physicists, and the people that we knew from our previous life, reprobates, they would never believe God, right? Nope.
No.
Right?
Too smart.
Too smart. They think it's a cargo cult. They don't have faith in this at all. They think it's a cargo cult. They know there's truth to it. They just ain't believing who it's from. They're saying, nope, it's a bunch of aliens. They've kept us quarantined here on Earth, and we're going to get out of it. And, that's what they saw. They did to Jesus all the way up to this point where we're at now. This is just them getting smarter. It says, why do the heathens rage? Why together and they conspire against, God's anointed one? But the Lord will have them. basically himself because he's going to laugh from the heavens. It's not talking about the afterlife. It's talking about from the sky, from the universe above. This is them finishing it now. They're going to try to kill the last of the people that are going to tell you the truth. That's what's coming after next April. They've told an awful lie, and because there's false teachers and false prophets out there telling people that there are supernatural hybrids walking around, yeah, with fallen angel DNA in them, a complete awful thing. That's that QAnon stuff, serpent seed doctrine, complete lies. That's what demons are, lies that people believe and go and actually do horrible things like shoot their children with spear guns or commit suicide or something like that.
The parable of the wheat and the tares. The angels went to the Lord and said, Master, someone has placed tares amongst the wheat. Should we go and take them up? And the Lord said, No, lest you damage any of the wheat, leave them there until the harvest, and then gather them up, tie them into bundles, and burn them. Jesus Christ was telling us about other beings here on this earth who look like us, but are not like us. They are half angel, half human. They shall mingle their seed with the seed of man. When the time of the harvest comes, we will know who these people are. These half-breed subhumans that look just like us. Remember, we are the wheat. We are the body of Christ. And they are the tares. A tare looks just like wheat. You can't tell the difference. We share this earth with them. We walk amongst them and they walk amongst us. And they look just like us. And you can't tell the difference until the harvest. Then when the harvest comes, we will be able to tell the difference between them and us. And that's when God's angels will come and gather them up, tie them into bundles and burn them. And we shall never have to put up with them again. Thank you, Jesus.
That's the kind of stuff they're spreading, except they won't tell them fallen angels. To the reprobates, it's going to be the story they're telling themselves right now, that it's aliens doing this, to get Earth under quarantine. I seen a conversation between two of them, yeah, and they believe that when they get rid of the people that obey, yeah, the Bible, the real Bible, yeah, they believe, this is their fantasy, they're telling themselves that when they get rid of these people, that the aliens will realize their experiment's over and they'll leave and go somewhere else and then leave them alone. This is what they're actually telling themselves. This is that group that it says he takes intelligence with. Those who forsake the Holy Covenant, it's these guys. Yeah? That's why we're so worried. You don't have to believe us now. After next April, you won't have a choice, though. Just like all of the people that didn't believe us up to this point. Where did it get your friends in Moscow? Huh? Nowhere good, right? Yep. They didn't believe us. And we were telling them trying to warn them out of love and tell them the truth. Didn't get the people I told in America anywhere that didn't believe us. But we're telling you again, because after next April, you will not have a choice. They're going to tell this. They're going to do this. This is coming out. And then God has to step in at this point. And when I know he does, the world is not going to see it for what they're going to see it for. They're going to see it as an alien attack. That's what it boils down to. God has to do what he said he was going to do. The world's just going to tell a lie about it. The rapture is not something, I mean, I think you know this already. It's not something that happens like people get zapped into another world. Yeah, that's not the case. It's not a ball of light thing.
By its nature, the prophecy of the rapture defies rational analysis. The rapture would be a supernatural event, a miracle orchestrated by a supreme being, and as such is a matter strictly of faith.
The rapture is not something, I mean, I think you know this already. It's not something that happens like people get zapped into another world. Yeah, that's not the case. It's not a ball of light thing. It's the last thing the God of love can do for a world who's rejected him. They were able to hide the first of us, him, the Lamb, being raised from the dead. They could hide that and make up a story about it. This time around, they won't be able to. That's the last thing God can do for the whole world, is raise people from the dead. And if they'll believe that, and they'll believe what those people are telling them, he can save everybody else that's left. That's it. Because after that happens, the wrath is poured out. And I can promise you, there is nobody on this earth that has any idea just how scary that actually is. We don't want to see that happen to anybody. I wouldn't want to see it happen even to Donald Trump. I would hope that anybody that hears this would change their mind about the things they've done. The wrath is what we're trying to avoid, because the books are being opened, and you're either going to get judged by the Lamb's book, or you're going to get judged by the book of the law. One of the two. The book of love, or the book of the law. Yeah? The law says we're cursed, that every last one of us that doesn't continue in all those things, we're cursed. And that's the plagues that are poured out, all the plagues written in that book. We don't want to see that happen to anybody. And it's not a 7-year period, thank God. It's not, nobody, I mean, when I hear people say things like that, it's crazy. Short period of time, but during that window, there's still hope if the people repent and believe. Yeah? The ones that don't repent, they've sealed their fate. So this is what we're telling you. This is what's coming after next April. They're going to tell something to the whole world, and then the next, probably, you know, it's going to be about the next year and a half or so after that. It's going to be a really tough time for people like us, and that's why we're so scared now, because we see what's happened in Russia, and we realize we may not have opportunity much longer to get these messages to you guys. So we're telling you, again, the Bible's completely true. We're trying to do what we're supposed to do. We came to you with this message out of love. The man you've called the Antichrist again, you know, this was just him completing the game. Yeah? He's not the Antichrist, he's just the king of it. Yeah? The Antichrist is the United States and all the people that will worship it. Yeah? That's what it boils down to. So, we hope that we answered some of the questions here without sounding too crazy. I'm sorry, you know, we don't have a script we're going off of. We're just trying to tell you the truth as we know it. And do you have anything else you want to say to him?
No, I think.
Okay.